Joining me live now to discuss this, Richard Calland, a professor in constitutional law at UCT. Prof, a very good evening to you. Thanks indeed for your time. I think let's start with that package that was just filed by Samkele Maseko. A bit earlier on today, we saw the minister deny that he in any way tried to influence anything relating to Judge Daya Pillay. Why would the Chief Justice lie, and why would he bring this issue up so many years later? Why didn't he bring it up then?
I think that's a very compelling question, Griselda, and good evening to you. Why would he wait 5 years to raise this matter if it was of importance? And why would he raise it during the course of a inevitably difficult and challenging interview for one of the candidates for the Constitutional Court, when in fact it's really none of her concern? It's really not her problem if somebody else has raised issues on her behalf, unless she in some way required that or instructed that to happen. There's no evidence of that. So it seems to me that the only reasonable conclusion is the Chief Justice acted deliberately with purpose, and that he intended to torpedo that particular candidate, Judge Daya Pillay's candidacy. And I think that's very unfortunate for her, and I think it's unfortunate for the integrity of the judicial selection process.
In this particular instance, that very question is being asked about why the Chief Justice kept quiet. With this now denial coming from the minister, you talk about a possible deliberate effort to torpedo the judge that had been in this particular interview. Does it certainly look that way from where you're sitting?
Well, it does. And you see, in politics, and the judicial appointment process is highly political these days, you cannot divorce the one from the other. And of course, we're facing a very high stakes game at the moment in terms of the RET faction being pushed onto the back foot. And as we all know, Minister Pravin Gordhan has been a thorn in the side of that faction. He's been a thorn in the side of the EFF and the thorn in the side of Jacob Zuma. So he's their public enemy number one. So any opportunity to bring him into disrepute, to scandalize him, will be seized by them. What's interesting is the timing of this. And of course, it's also linked, I think, to Judge President Slope and his particular case. There's big contrast, in my opinion, to be drawn. In Judge Slope's case, he made a particular attempt to influence a process as it was unfolding. It was pending. In this case, as everybody concedes, the original decision 5 years ago had gone against Judge Pillay. She was no longer in the running. The decision had been taken. So even if Minister Gordhan raised a question about how she performed with the Chief Justice, really I think the answer to the question is, so what?
All right. I'm going to move on to something else now, just about 4:45 this afternoon. It seems the former President Jacob Zuma is willing to go to jail. He says he will not depose of an affidavit as asked by the Chief Justice. Are you surprised?
I'm not surprised at all. What I expected today was that the deadline would come and go, and that later this evening we would get a long diatribe from either Jacob Zuma himself or his foundation. In fact, he was a few hours early. He sent this letter, not an affidavit. He was asked by the court, directed by the court on Friday, to depose a 15-page affidavit. Instead, he sent a 25-page. Diatribe, I think is the politest word one can use for it, in which he basically contradicts himself constantly. It's disingenuous. And once again, it contains many unfounded allegations of fraud and other impropriety against the Constitutional Court and the rule of law. And it's extremely unfortunate. It's scandalous, in fact.
But what does this now mean? I mean, the former president says that these are political gimmicks from the bench.
Well, he makes that allegation because he wishes to, I think, to create a political crisis because he's run out of legal runway. But there's no evidence for this. It's unfounded. It's an attempt to undermine the integrity of the court, delegitimize it perhaps in the public eye, or at least in the eye of some of his loyalist followers, and therefore create a kind of concern or crisis even that will be somehow a bargaining chip. And of course, your package included some of the leaked footage, leaked audio from Jesse Duarte's extraordinary comments in the top 6 meeting the other day. which suggests that, in a sense, Zuma's strategy is working at least with some people in the leadership of the ANC, because she was, A, calling for some kind of political solution for Jacob Zuma, which is perhaps not surprising, but B, more surprising and alarming, she seemed to be picking up on some of the threads of his unfounded allegations against both Deputy Chief Zondo and even the Chief Justice.
And what kind of conundrum does that create? I'll speak a bit later about this with one of our other analysts as well, but I have to ask you this. What kind of conundrum does that then create? Because previously we saw an apology coming from the Secretary General of, I beg your pardon, the Deputy Secretary General of the ANC, Jessie Duarte, which she apologized to Justice Zondo for comments that she made in an opinion piece, and also said that members who have been called to basically appear before the commission should do so, but behind closed doors, if that recording is anything to go by, she's singing a totally different tune.
Well, it's very revealing. It suggests that the apology she made after her previous unfortunate foray into judicial governance was not really worth the paper it was written on, that her real belief, as expressed in that recording, is that the judiciary is in some way politicised, it's factionalised. I think that's completely wrong. I think by and large the judiciary have held the line extraordinarily well, despite numerous attempts to intimidate judges and courts over the last few years. Yeah. I think South Africa should be very proud of its rule of law, very proud of the resilience that judges have shown under that sort of pressure. And I think it's incredibly unfortunate that significant leaders such as the Deputy Secretary General of the ANC should take that line. I think the President should bring her into line. President Ramaphosa, he's made it very clear that he supports the rule of law, he supports the Constitution. And I think all of this shows is that there are deep rivers running at the moment in terms of factional warfare, in terms of the battle for power and ascendancy.
Richard Calland, Professor in Constitutional Law at the University of Cape Town, thank you very much for joining us on the programme.